Well, the president and the deputy speaking to the lateness of some of the government officials, including the assertions by the president that some of his appointees were clueless in their ministries. Quite heavy words right there from the president. Allow us to interrogate them further. I'm joined by three esteemed gentlemen. Dismas, Mokua, political risk analyst. Karibu sana to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Equally joined by advocate Ishmael Nyaribo. Karibu sana. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Asante sana for your time. And equally joined... well, we are laughing here because one of us was a little bit not on time, and we happen to be talking about cabinet secretaries who were not on time. I'll put you on the spot.
It wasn't me. He needs to express himself in writing.
Yes,
and
yes.
You must not blame the traffic.
Do not blame traffic. Anyway, gentlemen, karibuni sana. It's a pleasure to have you with us. And I'll start with you, Mokua. Let's speak about the importance of this particular signing, the contract or the performance contract. What exactly does it entail? Does it ensure that the effectiveness within government is enhanced? And equally, let's speak to the lateness of some of the cabinet secretaries.
Well, you know, when you are a leader like President Kenyatta, your responsibility number one is to paint the overall picture of where you want Kenya to go. And then you attract and retain top talent, and then you allocate financial resources. Now, using various instruments, including the Finance Act, is being able to allocate financial resources. Now, the remaining big key bit is the human resource factor, and that's why we're signing those performance contracts, just to ensure that every person, every cabinet secretary knows their responsibilities, so that everybody is aligned. And there's expectation that after the cabinet secretary, it's going to be cascaded to principal secretaries all the way to the lowest cadre. So that, number one, the president has given his political goodwill that the public service in Kenya is going to be under performance management, and then everybody else is aligned. So that is why it's very important. And for the public sector, public performance is very critical because majority of the services you get from the public sector are almost monopolies. So a citizen does not have a choice. Unlike in the private sector, maybe if you're talking about mobile telephone in Kenya, if you're unhappy with one company, then you can go to the other one. But if you're talking about services from the public sector, say you want to get a passport and you're not able to get it in a good time, you don't have another option. You have to stick with the people who are supposed to offer it. So the essence of this public performance management, in my understanding, is to ensure that all those charters you see at government offices, that they're going to serve you in an efficient and effective manner, number one, that are adhered to, and then using those contracts and the proposed legislation, then the government will be able to identify who is actually working and who is not working. For the people who are working, they're going to be promoted based on meritocracy. And for the people who are not delivering, I suspect they'll be requested to seek opportunities elsewhere. So in my view, this thing is very timely. And maybe what they need to look at is how to reward, whether it's going to be monetary reward or any other form of reward, so that when you see meritocracy, then you don't just see meritocracy, that meritocracy is recognized and rewarded.
Well, interesting. Wakili, talk to us about some of the issues that stood out for you, including what the president said in terms of the effectiveness of some of the appointees in their respective positions.
Yeah, I think he's an astute leader from his nature anyway. If you look at the way he openly speaks about senior government officials coming to the meeting late, calling them out openly. When you look at the fact that he actually says some of my appointees have no clue on what is going on, and he says he gets better intel and information from a department than the CEO of that department, I think that is quite something to behold. I mean, he comes out as a person who wants to deliver. Politics aside, it shows that the president is hands-on and is interested in ensuring that what he has promised must be delivered at all costs. But coming back to also the question you put across in terms of how important are these contracts. You see, I don't know really how they look like, but what we know from literature, a contract should be able to be connected to the user department, for example, and the employees for that matter, and the CEO, in this case the president, what he wants and what the executive wants. At the same time, any stakeholder involved, it should also be captured in that contract. So in this case, does the government want simply to showcase that people can come in the office at 6 and leave at 6, or it wants to ensure that goods and services are properly allocated to citizens, so that the performance contract should be able to tell us whether are the ministers and permanent principal secretaries, are they allowed to be loose mouths? I mean, are they prohibited by the contract signed on behalf of the people of Kenya and on behalf of State House or the president? Is he telling them that the language I prefer in public speech is this? So if this is missing in those contracts and there are loose canons in terms of the speech, talking about genital language and all that, if this is exactly what is in that contract, then of course it does not serve us. And the president has said clearly that he will work with all leaders to ensure that each and every person in the country gets service. Whether you are in UDA, Kenya Kwanza, ODM, Azimio, whatever you are, that services will be rendered to everybody. So are these performance contracts, because you must have measurable deliverables. I mean, how do you say actually Honorable XYZ has actually performed according to the contract? Did he abuse people? Did he insult them? Is that what is in the contract? So the contracts must also be seen by us. What are they saying? That I will come to the office, I will keep time in terms of coming, yes. I will try to read broadly in my area, yes. So I don't know what the contract looks like, but if it is business as usual, that big and senior government officials come and use loose language, I mean, for me, I'm passionate about that, because we are going to grow a society and children who are really trying to imitate and emulate public service. So most important thing for me is these contracts should be able to be measured by an ordinary citizen, that the prices will come down. If it is expenditure, how is this Department of Water, Department of Transport, how is it utilizing? Because finally, the real issue or the real reason why we are signing these contracts is so that you can reduce expenditure and the wastage and ensure that there's enough money in the exchequer so that the government can use it to give services and goods to the people.
Okay, interesting perspective right there. So Hesbon, Owilla, as you come in, I heard from the Deputy President where he said it's unfortunate that most cabinet secretaries cannot regulate themselves, and he mentioned how hard it is to hold a cabinet committee meeting due to lack of quorum, and perhaps that's why the President issued restrictions here and there. But I think it's 9 months down the line since the cabinet was constituted. Looking at some of the reactions, and remember initially we had the conversation around meritocracy or vis-a-vis rewarding political loyalty, and we well know the route the president decided to take. So months later, looking at the output of some of the cabinet secretaries, what say you about their effectiveness in those positions so far?
Well, you know what happens with performance contracting and basically setting up of strategic goals in any organization is that it starts from the top, and there is a lot of discussion that goes on. So what they were signing was actually a product of a discussion that already happened. And my understanding, I may not have information about the content of each individual performance contract that they were signing, but this is how they are done all over the world in the corporate world. That the vision bearer, in this case the president, who has a plan and he was given the mandate by Kenyans to implement that plan, draws that plan, and all the cabinet secretaries and the ministry and the departments and the parastatals have to have a discussion with him on how whatever their departments are all about, whatever their ministries are all about, will fit into that plan. So it starts with the president himself drawing the direction, the vision, the strategic goals. This is what you want to do in the next financial year. This is what the finance bill is going to collect for us. This is what the budget has appropriated for each ministry. But this is exactly what we need to do. This is what the president wants to do. Now, each ministry, how do I pick from the goals of the president, what do I fit in, so that if I deliver this, the president has delivered. So I'm sure that discussion happened before. And it is certain that the signing of the performance contract, whether people came late or early, does not in itself negate the fact that there was a robust discussion and the president knows the deliverable for each and every cabinet secretary. So I think to that extent, would actually be very happy if we have a president who is at the cutting edge of things, knows almost everything that is happening in every ministry. Because that what that does is that most of us can't envy these cabinet secretaries because they have to be ahead of the president. And I don't think it's an easy task. But let me come back to your question, which ties into what the president said, that he has more information than his cabinet secretaries. Now, this is 1 year down the lane since they took power, and of course, since he appointed most of his cabinet secretaries. That should be a concern for most Kenyans. You know, why? If Parliament, approved these appointments, and we remember what members of Azimio said, that let us give the president his, let me not use the word that they used, but they actually approved the people that the president wanted to work with, you know. Yeah. And we've discussed it here, times above numbers, that the president essentially went for loyalty, and we assumed that even if you are to be loyal in this country, Kenyans have gone to school. There is a high likelihood that you'll be loyal to people who are learned, people who are capable. And I think if you look at that cabinet, I mean, to a large extent, there are men and women who are capable of delivering, you know, and you can't fault them for, not delivering. Now, the critical question is, even if we don't know whatever they signed up to, the statements by the president and the deputy president, suggest that there is a lot to be desired in the entire working arrangement. Because if you give people a responsibility to deliver, and there's a performance contract that they've signed, there is clarity that this is the overarching objective that you have as the president. This is what a cabinet secretary in a certain ministry has picked and said, based on this overarching objective, these are the things that you should evaluate me on in the next few months. That basically tells you that the president doesn't need to be ahead of the cabinet secretary, doesn't need to be calling people, beneath the cabinet secretary. There needs to be a sense of trust that I appointed Jesse in this cabinet ministry, and Jesse is going to deliver. So for me, I think we should be worried that, there's an overbearing president who is a lot more demanding, which could be good, but you see, leadership is about effective communication. Leadership is about motivating the team that you lead. And if you motivate the team that you lead and they understand the goal, then you don't have to be ahead of them. And you don't have to be proud of the fact that you're ahead of them. And I can tell you, if you're proud of the fact that you're ahead of them, then you're making us revisit what Parliament said, that they gave you what you wanted. And what you wanted may not be what works for Kenya. And I think that is where we need to be worried.
I think, the performance contracting is domiciled at the office of the cabinet secretary. And Ishmael has decided to pick only one strand on language or civility or diplomacy. But the essence
it's really of what concerns me.
Yeah, but the essence of performance contracting is to make the public sector efficient and effective. Not necessarily to reduce expenditures or costs, is to make it effective and efficient. So that if the Department of Immigration tells you, if you apply for a passport on day 1, you're going to get it on day 4, then on day 4 you should get that passport. That when you go back, nobody's going to give you a layer of excuses. That is the reason of that. And then Professor Yao came late, has indicated that that a number of those cabinet secretaries who are getting SOMO, they had very serious challenges during the vetting, which is a statement of fact. A number of them, when they were being vetted, people sat back and said, wait a minute, are they going to deliver? But some of them have shocked Kenyans, like the CS for Tourism, Alonza. She's been able to proactively address the human-wildlife conflicts, offered people compensation, and and she's promoting Western Kenya as a tourist circuit. When you are before a camera and intimidating people like these two gentlemen, it's very easy for you to get confused. But I think she's settled down. Now, the issue of timekeeping, in my view, is a very, very pertinent issue. Because in some societies, in Japan, a public servant of rank who runs late for a meeting resigns. It happened not long time ago in the House of Commons when I think a minister ran late, and on account of running late, the minister resigned. Now, one would dare to imagine that if you are running late for President Ruto's meeting, where you are going to sign your own performance contracting, what happens to people who are coming to see you at your office? It's very easy. I mean, you want to keep the president waiting, the head of state, head of government, commander-in-chief, the one who appointed you to office, but you've got capacity to keep him waiting. What of Professor Owilla who is coming to your office? For how long will you have tea at your reception? Those are some of the critical issues that I think they must be addressed. And in my view, timekeeping must be a key performance indicator, not just in the public sector, but also in the private sector.
Just on this, how valuable these contracts are, where are they kept? Now, Mokua is saying they are domiciled at the
Prime Cabinet Secretaries. Yeah.
But who follows them up? You see, that is the concern of the citizens. What happens? I mean, they are signed, so what happens? In the private sector, how they handle it, you, every other year, you again do an appraisal with your immediate superior, and your superior also with his immediate superior, and goes downwards that way until every single employee or staff member is actually appraised. So in this case, I think that the permanent secretary, the principal secretary would appraise the minister would then appraise probably the head of civil service, and the head of civil service appraises again the minister and goes downwards. So that who appraises then? The head of state. Probably, I don't know how they have planned, whether they have this appraisal method, because appraisal is critical in the sense that you're here, Jesse, and after this show, we shake hands and say, hey, you didn't give us enough time. That is appraisal already, isn't it? And you say, hey, you guys were a little bit, taking all the time, there's a lot of, what do you call it? A lot of OTOs, so to say, irrelevant communication you passed across. So appraisal is important for this contract to actually be properly gauged. Okay. So I don't know then whether the head of state probably would be appraised by Raila Odinga, maybe. How did you perform?
The head of state is appraised by voters every 5 years, and you see the key performance indicators in the scoreboard. You see inflation, you see interest rates, you see debt, you see the levels of unemployment. That is how they are appraised.
Put as you see money in our pocket.
Yeah, pesa mfukoni. And before the end of every financial year, there's a ceremony at KCC where the ones who've hit the high notes are recognized, and the ones who have been a bit, who have not hit the high notes are probably not recognized. So it happens. But maybe the challenge is, are there consequences for non-delivery? That if you do not deliver, then does the president accept your resignation, or he'll probably give you another opportunity?
And I think, remembering the report prepared by my colleague Rita Tinina, she mentioned that there wasn't any clarification on the consequence if you did not meet the intended targets. So that's really important. And perhaps add your voice to a point that Hesbon raised in terms of the downside to President Ruto's micromanaging approach, the style of leadership, that perhaps it might create lack of trust in the appointees, hence create lack of, rather fear and uncertainty in terms of them doing their job. Is that a double-edged sword that you might see becoming an issue down the line?
Well, in my view, if you've got capacity and competence in your docket,
yes,
and you are a subject matter, and you are handling your docket very well, you should not be worried that the president knows what is happening at your docket. Because if you have got that capacity and competence, you will have a global understanding of your docket. So the president will not surprise you with a call. But if you spend all your time having a single malt whiskey and Yamachoma, then there's a very high chance that the president knows more that is happening in your docket, and is going to place a call, and you'll find yourself in big trouble. Again, it would be very reckless for President Ruto not to know what is happening at every state department. Because bear in mind, President Ruto has got a contract with Kenyans. Cabinet secretaries, principal secretaries, parastatal heads do not have a contract with Kenyans. After 5 years, people will look at President Ruto's scoreboard and ask him, we gave you power. We gave you responsibility. We gave you authority. What have you done? Is there a person Fukoni? Okay. So the person who is going to suffer the consequences of non-delivery is the president. Okay. But if he delivers, then he'll have his contracts renewed. So in my view, what the president told the public servants of rank, that in the unlikely events, I get to know more than you about your docket, then prepare to do a resignation letter. Because in that case, one of you must go home, and it will not be the president. It will be the other person.
Okay. Hesbon.
You know, I mean, it's very simple. You know, any leader, corporate world, political leadership, or whichever space, you've got to influence the led to the right direction, to do the right thing. You've got to motivate them to do the right thing, and you've got to communicate. And I think where we are, if you are serving in President William Ruto's government, and he knows more than you know, then you've not been influenced enough, and you lack the capacity to serve in that ministry. You've not understood his communication enough, and you've not been motivated enough. Because, I mean, we all know the president. I mean, he's been in the public domain. He's been the deputy president for 10 years. We know that he's always at the cutting edge of things. So if you're appointed as a cabinet secretary, it is upon you to be at the cutting edge, to be ahead of the president in what the president has given you a responsibility to take charge of. And you see, for me, it is a writing on the wall that if you can't stand the heat, then stay out of the kitchen. So if you cannot be at a point where, I mean, wherever we've worked, you know that you don't go to your boss and tell your boss this is the problem. You actually go to your boss and tell the boss that these are the challenges, these are the solutions, but we have like 3 options of the solutions. But this, I think, is the best solution to go with, and you give the rationale for that. Now, if it is the president who understands the challenges in your ministries, understands everything that is happening in your ministry, and you offer no counsel to the president, I think that was just a writing on the wall, that there are people in that cabinet, parliament was just benevolent enough to give the president what he wanted. 1 year down the lane, they've shown the president they don't have what it takes. And just like Dismas has said, you know, at the end of the day, if you look at what we've experienced in the last 1 year, there are 2 things that we've seen. There is winning the presidency, and there is purpose of the presidency. This regime is still celebrating winning the presidency. They are still big on winning the presidency. We are yet to see the purpose of the presidency. I mean, over the weekend, guys were eating rice and beef, you know, in Mount Kenya region. And there are people who are celebrating that this is a government that promised, and they are delivering. Clearly, if our benchmark is to promise people rice and beef, and we deliver that, there's a problem. Someone ought to be telling this guy that rice and beef is a bare minimum. That is something that you can give people. But if Kenyans are going to evaluate the president or on the scorecard based on this performance contracting that we have, no one is going to care about what they ate at Sagana. People will be looking at very substantive issues. And tell me, when Kibaki became the president, there are tangible things that we saw immediately. Free primary education. We saw our GDP grew exponentially. Revenues grew. I mean, there's no cabinet secretary in Kibaki's government who talked about President Moi. For heaven's sake, if you compare Moi and President Uhuru Kenyatta, today we went to Mount Kenya, the things they were launching were a function of the purpose of the presidency and the purpose that President Uhuru Kenyatta was rooted on. It's the reason why they are launching projects. They didn't launch, they didn't finance, they were not even developed during the reign. It was during President Uhuru Kenyatta's time. 5 years down the lane, if they are not careful, if they are still talking about winning the election, they will not have anything to show Kenyans.
Jesse, I'm aware we don't have all the time, but I just want to mention one more thing. I know you want to move to the next topic. Appraisal. Of course, the president, by the way, has every right to know whatever is happening, and that's not micromanaging in my view. in practice, the head of state will be appraised of, will be informed, will be, people will report to him on every other day or week in accordance with the rules and the way he wants. And then practically from the nature of William Samoei Ruto himself, he's hands-on. So he cannot fail to know what's actually happening wherever. However, I think his major complaint is if he knows and you don't know, at least you ought to know so that when you appraise him, when you go to his office or when you report to him and do all the reports, it should be more or less the same, the things he knows, but you should not look like you don't have a clue that probably the dams are burst and water has spilled. You should appear to have that knowledge. Unfortunately, he says his guys don't, not all of them have that capacity. But we should also blame our people for who they are. I have looked at the UDA manifesto in terms of, for example, bringing the price of food down and essential commodities through agriculture and production. So that is where we can do the appraisal. Is it happening or it's not? They are telling us that Russia has given free fertilizer. I don't know if it is the same fertilizer that is now 2,500 or that is in addition.
Okay.
Are you seeing? So it's so easy to appraise, even the head of state, even before 5 years. 5 years is a question of decision making, but we can appraise our head of state every other year. Like, oh yes, Your Excellency, you said this, but we have gotten this. And it's not exactly what you wanted. And of course, I think we'll get the time to discuss the talks and all that. You will realize that much of what is going on is really more political psychology than actually delivering what you have promised.
Let me quickly buttress these points. You will begin to rate Kenya Kwanza administration at the end of their first financial year, because that's when they've allocated resources. And contrary to what Owilla has indicated, a respected elder in any village, when people come to see you, you slaughter chicken for them, you give them bananas. They don't just come to your compound and yawn away. So giving people rice and nyama at Sagana State Lodge, I see nothing wrong. And then talking about President Kibaki, President Kibaki and President Moi, they set the gold standard on what a president must do when they go to retirement. People must talk about President Kenyatta because he's accused of many things, including supporting the Mandamano. So if a former head of state is in the middle of supporting Mandamano, you do not expect Kenya Kwanza to be passing red roses to him every day. They must ask him, but Mr. President, why are you supporting Mandamano?
Speculations and allegations.
No, those are statements made by Kenya Kwanza.
So we are not going to regurgitate statements made by Kenya Kwanza that are not verified and are basically based on spurious political speak. There's no evidence anywhere that has been tabled that the former president is supporting Mandamano.
And there's no evidence that he doesn't support the Mandamano.
The president himself has come out and said that the only problem is that he's a friend of Raila Odinga.
Would you expect him to go to the top of Mount Kenya and say, yes, I support Mandamano, I admit I support Mandamano?
Maybe not. This must just if you give us a time. It is true that professionally speaking, professional scientists and all analysts like us can start to rate the president practically after the first financial year. But the citizens don't do that. The citizens know you are head of state immediately after you are announced the head of state. So if you are going to start to beg citizens, give me time, they will never give you time. Either in the first year or third year or fifth year. It's like a crying baby. The baby must eat. So food, water, infrastructure. If it's rainy and there's water all over on the road, you cannot tell citizens that I want 1 year before I can fix this issue. It is true, it will take time, but you cannot focus on that. You cannot not even focus on what happened in the past years, handshake, whatnot. You just focus on how every single service can be delivered from day one when you go into office. But if you start saying, oh, I have not found money in the kitty, people are forming cartels to deny me opportunity to work, could be true. But the citizens will actually judge you as an individual. They will not judge the former president. They will not judge the past. They will judge you.
Okay, interesting. It's been a politically heavy week, and just as we perhaps shift focus to the other talking point, it's also proper to note the how do I call it, the double speak from the cabinet was equally highlighted this week in terms of the WorldCoin dilemma. So one ministry saying this, the other saying this, but later on they came in one voice. So it's really proper to note the direction the cabinet is heading. Let's shift focus to talks about talks. And that's been one of the major talking points throughout the week. Of course, we well know of the development so far. The 10-a-side team has been mentioned. We well know who's representing Kenya Kwanza and Azimio. We're not too sure about the venue, at least as per the latest letter by Kenya Kwanza, who mentioned they are keen on holding that meeting in, you know, an area of, yes, somewhere they would pay to talk about the cost of living. It's totally understandable. So let's just take a look at some of the insights that have been shared by leaders across the political divide in the run-up to the talks about the talks that might be scheduled to start this week, Thursday. Let's listen in.
Na tumewaambia ile vitisho walikuwa naye ati ndio wapate serikali nusu mkate haitafanyika tena. Haiwezekani.
And even as we walk into the negotiations with our friends in Azimio, we want to tell them that we are discussing on how to end violence in our politics. We will discuss how they will accept election results.
Sisi kama Azimio tuko tayari kuongea. Tutaongea. Na tumewapatia wale jamaa siku 30 kuongea. Baada ya siku 30 kama jamaa bado wamekaa ngumu, tutatoa amri nyingine. Lakini tumetoa tume ambayo inaongozwa na Bwana Kalonzo Musyoka kuongea na wale kutoka ngambo ile nyingine. Na tumesema tutaongea bila masharti. Wao vile vile tumesema usitoe masharti kwetu.
Interesting. So some of the insights, rather those sound bites, were just shared over the course of the weekend. Raila Odinga there and the president equally speaking to the talks about the talks. So it's clear, Hesbon, Owilla, that the team has been committed. We're not too sure whether it's Wednesday or Thursday, but the talks should start. We've seen a time frame of 30 days given by the Azimio coalition and what you call political posturing. You know, it's definitely rare. Both sides mentioning, you won't tell us what to talk about, this is what we decide to talk about, you know. So for those who are looking at this and questioning whether it will go down just the same way as, you know, the bipartisan talks previously went down, that no tangible conclusion will be found at the end of the day.
Well, I think it's unfortunate. I mean, if you listen to the sentiments that we've had in the public domain from both sides of the political rivals, you realize that it seems like this is not dialogue. This is the two sides speaking, you know, at each other, which is fairly unfortunate. I mean, when politicians get a crowd, I don't know what comes of them. Because if you have a bipartisan discussion and you go to a public rally, and part of the conversation that you are having in the public domain is that you will send Raila to Bondo, that we want a discussion to end Mandamano, to end you know, deaths along our streets. You know, some of these things, like if you talk about Mandamano, we can't keep emphasizing that it is enshrined in the Constitution. If you want to stop that, you are the government in power. Just stop the police from brutalizing people. People don't need to discuss that. That is already clear in black and white. Stop the police. And you see, if this is a government that was enthroned, so to speak, by the hustlers, if the hustlers have a problem with what the situation is, you know, and they are coming out to express themselves, a responsive government that is for the people would actually shepherd them to a demonstration and to give that petition to the same government, and then that government ought to be responding to that. So where we have reached, I think we need to stop this idea of the electioneering period, the idea of who won the election. and start focusing on what are the critical issues, that are ailing the common mwananchi. Neither Azimio nor Kenya Kwanza is speaking about those critical issues. If Kenya Kwanza is speaking about Raila, then you have Azimio speaking about what Kenya Kwanza is doing or not doing. Where exactly is the interest of mwananchi? I mean, we want to start discussing issues of Mandamano. We want to start discussing issues of entrenching the office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary. I mean, what exactly is that Kenya Kwanza is pushing? Are they reinventing BBI in a different format? We want to talk about bringing the office of the official opposition leader, which, if you look at what these politicians have been talking about, the president himself in Britain talked about entrenching the office of the official opposition leader. But in 2020, when BBI was launched, he was again critical that he needed to be convinced how that will solve the issue of winner takes it all, how that will address the issue of inclusivity. Now, if he needed to be convinced, if there was a problem, if they rejected BBI, this is supposed to be a conversation about Kenyans, not a conversation about who won the election and who didn't win, because, just like I've said, there is a preoccupation with winning the presidency. But we are not, we are beyond that. They won. How they won is a question of whether you are Zimio or Kenya Kwanza. Right now, there is the purpose of the presidency, what Kenyans call the president to do. And it is not just the president. Kimani Ichung'wah is the leader of majority in parliament. He should stop thinking that he's a bigwig in Kenya Kwanza. He should start thinking that he's the leader of the majority in parliament for all Kenyans, and we need a conversation. This thing cannot be about Raila, cannot be about William Ruto. This thing has to be about Kenyans. And let me tell you, and this is my own perspective, because I've followed these elections. We've never had an uncontested election in this country since multi-party democracy returned. That is 1992. The only one that we ever had was 2002. The conversation should be about how do we get to an election that is fair, free, fair, transparent, and verifiable, and an election that will give us a president where all Kenyans will feel included, so much so that no Kenyan will be worried that this president is not coming from my tribe. If they can table that conversation and have that conversation, anyone running away from that kind of a conversation, Kenyans would have a problem with that person.
Well, are you skeptical, Wakili? Because it seems they're going to the table with clenched fists, and we well know it's a recipe for disaster.
It is actually very unfortunate for the government to say, I saw the Speaker of the Senate saying clearly that these discussions will not bring out anything. I have seen Honorable Ichung'wah saying, if you want us to discuss about I don't know what and what, you'd better go back to Mandamano. So already the roads appear to be closed. So really, what are we going inside to do? What Raila is asking for, number one, and not for himself, by the way, when you keep saying Bondo, Bondo, we all don't come from Bondo. And there are millions of people who still stand behind Raila Odinga. I wish Kenya Kwanza would, for just a moment, cut Kenyans a slack and say, okay, we can deal with Raila, but there are people behind him. And they do not necessarily hate you as Kenya Kwanza, but they think that they belong to a voting bloc that sees this particular gentleman as their leader. So proper governance should really stop this song of, I cannot even use the kind of words they have been using when they try to describe who is protesting. Having said this, what is eating into Azimio? What is the problem with the people who belong to this grouping called Azimio? They are saying we want a proper audit of the 2022 general elections. Presidential elections. Now, they would, I am sure they would want to do all audits, but because it's complex, they want 2022. Let's go to the United States. What happened? Now, Trump has been indicted for involving himself in overthrowing the will of the people. And that's the United States. Let us imagine for a moment, as it is said, that Raila and Uhuru Kenyatta actually wanted to overthrow the will of the people, isn't it? That has been said. It's out here. So why can't we investigate that? This is what Raila is trying to say. Okay, so somebody here sat and tried to connive with another one so that they can overthrow the will of the people. What Americans did, and it's something we must pick from them. They are honest. they are willing, they wanted to investigate the president when he was in office, actually. The Attorney General, was ready, but, because of the law and immunity to the president, when he's in office. He survived it. But then he committed another unforgiven sin. He went ahead to plant a coup so that Joe Biden does not come to the office. And Americans say this cannot be our culture. So we must investigate it. There were people opposing that. They have now investigated, and that panel has actually found that Donald Trump is guilty. Now he has to face the charges again. So what is this that Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga did, which we cannot investigate? You should look at it from the other side as well. If they did something, we must bring them to book. We must investigate and say, "Enyewe, you Raila and Uhuru, now we see you wanted to overthrow the will of the people, you belong to the jail." Okay. So just to deny blanketly that we don't want to do any audit, elections were completed and we are now going forward. That is also cool if that is what Kenyans want. So bring it on the table, discuss, is this what a majority of Kenyans want? Would they like to audit their electioneering mechanisms and how it happened in 2022? If by a majority they say yes, then why would you deny them that chance? Because it is Kenyans who want to evolve, who want to make themselves into what they want, not what an individual or two or the winning team wants Kenya to be. I hope I am making that clear so that you don't, Dismas, start to say that. I'm not interested in any party misunderstanding this. I think when these people go to the table to discuss honestly, they can discuss the IEBC, like Ichungwa said. It is good actually. On that part, I support him. Why should we have maandamano that must kill? You see, so we can agree, let's discuss what is picketing. And they say it should come on Uhuru Park. I think we will be so privileged. We've had Supreme Court case on media. It's not new. We can participate by the things being televised live so that we can actually listen and hear how do this maandamano start and who brings the violence. Okay. So if leaders can be sober, I don't think any side is saying the wrong thing. It is beneficial to us when they disagree like that. But when they block the discussions, I think that's where the problem begins.
So let's talk about the issues, Dismas, briefly, because just hearing from Kimani Ichung'wah, who's leading the Kenya Kwanza team, he's suspect about whatever they term as inclusivity, whatever Azimio terms as inclusivity. According to him, this is a route to come to nusu mkate government. So suspicion is rife. From your analysis, at the end of the day, what issues will hold water? What issues will make it to the finish line, regardless of what Kenya Kwanza and Azimio terms as critical issues? Yeah.
In my view, the two delegations and the delegation leaders, first of all, they need to have conversations before the talks where they craft the agenda. And in my view, the agenda must not necessarily be aligned to Kenya Kwanza or Azimio. The agenda must be aligned to Kenya's national and public interest. Because there are many people who are not in Azimio, they are not in Kenya Kwanza, but they are Kenyans, and they've got an insurable interest in the success of this conversation. So the conversation must be anchored in our national and public interests. That's number one. Number two, the conversations must be immunized from selfish interest. When the maandamano started, it became a moving target. Initially, it was open the server, stop the IBC recruitment of commissioners, then it came to the cost of living. And we understand when there was a conversation with General Basanjo, the cost of living disappeared through the cracks and many other things. And then now they started saying, let's talk about inclusivity. And inclusivity has got many definitions. One of the definitions for this conversation is that when you look at the cabinet and the public servants of rank, there are people who suggest that it can only be inclusive if they're the ones who have given the names. So like, for instance, if there's somebody who's supposed to be appointed from, who's in the cabinet from a certain part of Kenya, but a party has not given the name, then it's not inclusive. That it's only going to be inclusive if Dismas Mokua gives the name. They forget the fact that the president has got the obligation that in the crafting of his administration, he respects Chapter 6 and Article 10. Okay. So there are some public servants of rank from a particular part of Kenya who are in the administration, but one part of the conversation says, no, it's not inclusive because I do not give the name. The elephant in the room is elections. And not the MCA, governor, or MP. It's the presidential election. And we have said this times above number, for hours on end, that we need predictable systems for unpredictable outcomes. And then we must introduce this culture of accepting outcomes. That when you're going to run for president, there are two outcomes. You will win or you lose.
Okay.
If you lose and you are unhappy, you go to the Supreme Court. When the Supreme Court has pronounced itself, it's a wrap. You wait for 5 years. So the Supreme Court cannot declare you a loser. You take a sabbatical for 6 months, then you come back and say, wait a minute, I in fact won this election. So, essentially it means that you are invalidating the IBC declaration, and you are also invalidating what the Supreme Court indicated. So we must create that solid IBC, and I agree with Professor Owilla, a very solid IBC, that when the chairman pronounces the winner, nobody comes up and says, let me take some cold water, then I'll come back. Right. Because, every 5 years, from 92, the issue affecting Kenya, and it's a very serious political risk, is about the presidential elections, the outcomes. And there's one party who always disagrees with the outcome of the election. Then another elephant in the room is around the role of the General Obasanjo. Yeah. How do you invite General Obasanjo to Kenya to come and discuss the cost of Gorogoro? I don't know if you know what Gorogoro is, or Romotoriro, the cost of maize in Kenya. I mean, so you want General Obasanjo to come to Kenya and start reviewing our Finance Act. In my view, when you want to invite Obasanjo, you're suggesting that Kenya doesn't have solid institutions, Kenya doesn't have systems, we have a leadership vacuum, and we have a leadership crisis. Okay. And Owilla here is a student of communication. He'll tell you, if he's honest, that inviting Obasanjo is going to expose Kenya to reputational liabilities. There is nobody in Kenya who can sort out the issues between these two parties. You have to go and get Obasanjo. Obasanjo right now is well placed to go to Niger instead of coming to Kenya.
But he has gone, Obasanjo has gone, Jesse. Yeah.
As we finalize,
and now we are just having people throwing, all manner of words saying we are not ready to go to that. There will be no, it is not wrong. I've said this before. It is not wrong for a brotherhood in Africa. I mean, we belong to African Union. There is nothing wrong to ask a brother to mediate. Absolutely nothing wrong. What could be wrong is if he were to be here and continuously for months try to be problem solver for, like is Mr. Fix. But just to come in to say, hey, we love you as our neighbors, and we think that you can end this. If you wait until the country goes like the Niger way, then you start saying military must come in. That is really not proper for especially a peaceful country like Kenya. So when you have a problem in your home, Dismas, don't fear calling me so that we can...
No, you'll give me a few notes. However, Jesse, the elephant in the room here is...
Yeah, finally, here.
How many elephants now?
Kenya Kwanza has already demonstrated capacity and competence on fighting food inflation and addressing the cost of living. And that is the issue before Azimio shifted goalposts. That was the central issue. The president spoke about it, that unlike other times, this time there's going to be bumper harvest. There's many more acres of land that people have grown maize. In fact, people in Busia have already started enjoying the maize. I understand there's an avalanche, there's a flood of potatoes someplace in Nyandarua. Okay. So people like chips are really enjoying that. So now, why are you still inviting Obasanjo to come?
Well,
as you finalize,
yes, Dismas is making the issue of Obasanjo fairly simplistic, and I think it's just a joke. I hope.
No,
Obasanjo was not coming to dictate the granular details that were going to be the subject of the bipartisan talks. No, he was just coming to set an environment where people can speak to each other, not at each other. So I don't even think he went into the details of what Dismas mentioned, But I agree with Dismas. The elephant in the room is electoral justice. Okay. We cannot live in a democracy where the veracity of the elections that we have is a function of the Supreme Court. No, I mean, we understand law in Kenya to some extent, that the law in Kenya is I mean, judges make decisions on the basis of the interests of Kenyans, evidence adduced, and what the law states, you know. And those three, chances are, run away from the evidence that you can collect for any illegalities and irregularities. One thing we need to ask ourselves, we live in a society where we've had an electoral commission that has served a full term and exited office. But the things that they did in 2017, they were accused of illegalities and irregularities. The only remedy they've had, and they've stated this in the public domain, is that they had all the candidates sign a document that they would accept the result. I mean, you can't be that simplistic. And this is the same electoral body that told us that Azimio didn't even have agents. And then they have the audacity to tell us that we can't pay billions to IEBC and then have discussions after the elections. What exactly do they want? We need to have an electoral system that would build into the electoral justice system in this society. If you ask the Chebukati Commission, what have they added to our electoral system since the initial one by Isaac Hassan? It's even worse than what Kivuitu left us. Absolutely worse. I mean, the only thing that they can say is that people sign. People signing a document that they will accept an election does not amount to a free, fair, transparent, and verifiable election. Okay. Lastly, let me just say, this administration set itself up in a very high pedestal. No one can tell us not to talk about the price of Gorogoro. We will keep talking about it because they told us that they are going to address the plight of the hustlers. They told us that was the ideology they rode on, that they will make life bearable for Kenyans of all walks of life, whether you are in a boda, you are driving a big car. Okay. The problem they have today is that 1 year down the lane, things are worse. I don't know where Dismas lives. I don't know whether he landed in Kenya today. The price of maize has never gone down. It is worse. I don't know where Dismas lives. The price of going, the cost of going to university.
Using me as the reference point.
Because you say that Kenya Kwanza has delivered.
As you finalize,
yeah, the price of going to university has gone high.
Okay.
Principals in high school right now are charging parents simply because the cost of buying basic commodities that they feed students on has gone high, but the capitation that the government is still operating on is still in the past. Those are serious indicators that are telling us if this is a government that promised to make life bearable for the hustlers, and the hustlers are not having that life, then the hustlers have a reason to complain. But lastly, let me just say, so that I'm not perceived to be a prophet of doom, we all want this government to succeed. Because if this government succeeds, it is us Kenyans who will benefit. But we are requesting them that now the purpose is the purpose of the presidency. It is no longer about winning. If they won, it is okay. They can only build credibility and legitimacy by delivering, not by reminding us that they won. When you get to campus with an A or an B or wherever, it doesn't matter, you're in campus. Do what took you to campus. They are in government. Let them deliver for Kenyans. Even if they can't give us the promises that they made, at least we should see them making steps towards that delivery.
You are annoying Dismas.
No, I just want to run.
We have to finalize there.
30 seconds. It's important to know that when Kenya Kwanza took over, it's not as if the economy was stellar. The economy has been affected by local variables and international variables. Essentially, what Kenya Kwanza is doing is cleaning tables. And that's why they need at least 2 years for you to start measuring. You can go to the top of Mount Kenya and say that they've done a horrible job, but it's important to stick to facts. Because when you stick to facts, you become a truthful man.
It's okay.
Let's give him the final
say.
say.
It's okay. Thank you, Jesse, for inviting us.
Time is up. I think we'll really appreciate if we stuck to facts.
All right.
But where Kenyans have reached, if you delete Raila's name, Uhuru's name from the facts that they're giving us, there won't be nothing that they'll be giving us. It doesn't matter who won the elections at this point.
Okay.
What matters for most Kenyans right now is, do we have Pesa Mfukoni, Mudavadi, whose office we want to entrench in the constitution, promised? Do we have access to the basic things that we want? It is one thing to see the president, the speaker of the National Assembly, the attorney general, all these guys celebrating. It is unheard of that you have separation of power. Parliament, we've never seen this. So we don't know whether the speaker is leading an institution that oversights the government, and then over the weekend they're dancing together. They need to realize they want power. As principals who formed Kenya Kwanza, they need to deliver. We need to see parliament that is robust in oversighting the executive. And we need to see an executive that is intent on the purpose of the presidency, delivering for Kenyans.
That's
not intent on sending Raila home, bringing President Uhuru back.
In short, what you two are saying, you're keen on the deliverables, less blame game. He's saying, give us time. Simple. We are focused on that, give us time. 2 years is enough. Then you can call us.
Yeah, and again, that time is not used on blaming anyone.
Okay,
yeah,
gentlemen.
And again, if you look at the scoreboard, it's very clear.
Enough. Okay. 1 hour is fair enough as well for that discussion. Gentlemen, asanteni sana for your time. Dismas Mokua, political risk analyst, Hesbon Owilla, communication strategist, and advocate Ishmael Nyaribo. Asanteni sana, and all the best as you kickstart your week. Equally to our viewers back at home, all the best as you kickstart your week. My name is Jesse Rogers. Have yourself a good night.